All right, welcome to the 12-Minute Leadership Series, folks. My name is Pittampalli. We got a great topic for you today, which is how to write team emails that people actually read. Now, this has gotten a lot of support, this topic, because I know a lot of people struggle with this. We've all had this extremely frustrating experience of spending an hour or two or maybe three writing an email, a nice, thoughtfully worded, cogent email to send out to our team members, and then later on you find out that no one has read it. There's nothing more frustrating that I can think of than something like that, because you end up having to repeat yourself over and over again. It really is a inefficient waste of time for everyone involved. So today we're going to talk about tips to maximize the chances that people will read your emails. There's no way I can guarantee it, but what we can do is really optimize. And here's what I'm talking about specifically, because my thesis today is one of the reasons why people don't read our emails is because we fail to take into account the way people read emails. Okay? Today we're going to take a user experience perspective, because I think that by understanding the way people actually read emails, the way they receive them, we can gain a lot of critical insights that when we have them and we understand them and we embrace them, we can write emails in a way that maximizes the probability that people will read them. Okay, so today I have 5 tips for how to do that. Okay, so let's just jump into them, starting with the first one. Okay, the first tip for how to get people to read your email is an acronym, BLUF, BLUF. It stands for bottom line up front. This may very well be the most important tip I give you today, which is that you need to make sure that people understand what the email is all about within 5 seconds of them reading it. That's right, we're talking about 5 seconds. You have a very short amount of time. Because here's why this is so critical, because it's kind of obvious, but I think the reason why it's so important is a little bit not so obvious, because we fail to think about it. So remember, reading email is not the same thing as checking email. So here's what I'm talking about. Let's say I get an email from someone today, okay? The first thing that I'll probably do is I will probably check my email. Now, I will pull up my phone or I will pull up my laptop. I will look at my email. And the goal right now when I'm checking email is to see what is going on, right? To see what these emails are about. I might not have a lot of time to actually act on the emails, right? But the first thing I want to do is check them. So I'll look at your email, for example, and I will check it. And if in the first 5 seconds, just glancing at it, because that's what I'm going to do, if I understand what the email is about, right? Because that's what my question is that I'm asking is, what the heck is this about? If I can answer that question clearly, then what I do is I put this email on my mental to-do list, right? Because it's really clear. I know what I need to do. I know what the email is for. So I put it on my to-do list, and I'm probably not going to do it right now, right? Because I don't have time right now, but I will do it in the future. Once something goes on someone's mental to-do list, the probability of them actually acting on it and following through and reading your email is pretty high, okay? It's not perfect, right? Sometimes it falls through, but it's much better, relatively speaking. But here's what happens when the opposite happens, right? Somebody gets an email, all right? I get your email, for example. I do this glance, right? I'm checking my email. And in the first 5 seconds, I still have no idea what this email is about. Right? All I see is this long, lengthy email, and in 5 seconds of me checking it, I have no idea what it's about. Well, if I'm your teammate, I can't just ignore the email, right? I mean, you're an important person, so I probably won't ignore it. But what I'll do is I will put it, instead of on my mental to-do list, it will go in my mental junk drawer. Now, there's a difference between the mental to-do list and the mental junk drawer, right? If when something goes in the mental junk drawer, we intend to do something about it, but we never actually do, right? Because in our mind, there's just a whole bunch of crap in this drawer that we never want to deal with, okay? And so when people don't really understand what the email is about in the first 5 seconds, it goes in the mental junk drawer, and even though they probably fully intend to read it later on, because the chances are there might be something important in there, they don't. They forget about it. There's an aversion, and so they end up not doing it. So this is why it's so critical to tell them the bottom line up front. You want to get on their mental to-do list. So what I recommend is what I call the smartphone test, okay? Anytime you send out one of these team emails, imagine you're sending it to somebody that is on the street and will be checking it on their smartphone, okay? And they're just checking their email. They're not reading it yet. And in just a glance, okay, in 5 seconds, they're just looking at the email. Are they going to know what this email is about? That means the subject line and the first 2 sentences of the email, give or take, has to be really clear, has to be very succinct, and has to let them know what the email is about. If it doesn't, then it's going to go in the mental junk drawer and people won't read it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, let's move on to tip number 2. Make it skimmable. Okay, this is the second problem with why emails don't get read, is because we fail to remember that people don't read emails, they actually skim them, okay? On computer screens, on the web in general, people tend to not read things, right? They skim, they scan, okay? And if your email is worded in a way, is formatted in a way where it's hard to skim, where it's hard to scan, people are not going to read it, right? Even if you do a good job of giving them the bottom line up front, if when I sit down to actually read the email, if I can't really go through it quickly and pick out what are the important things to me, then I'm not going to read it. So what you need to do is you need to take advantage of bold headlines and bullet points and numbers and white space. This is critical. Just give people tons of white space, right? Short paragraphs. It should be very pleasing to the eye from afar, because again, what people are going to do when they see the email, they're going to check it first, then they're going to save it for later, then they're going to scan it, they're going to skim it. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to scan it really quickly to see what are the relevant parts to me, right? Because a lot of times not everything is as important. So they're going to scan it in order to finally figure out which portions should I read very closely. If they can't go through that second step, it's going to be very hard for you to get them to read your email, okay? So take advantage of very user-friendly formatting, all right? Number 3. Edit. Now, it's amazing to me how many people do not edit their emails, okay? Especially important emails, right? If it's just a short, little pithy email, send it out in one shot. But when we're talking about something that's more important, that's longer, you need to edit, folks. We need drafts, right? Your first draft is not going to be good. It's going to be wordy. It's going to be too long. What you need to do after your first draft is ideally give yourself a little bit of space, right? Take 10 minutes, ideally an hour if you can afford it, and give yourself some distance, come back and remove every unnecessary word. Stephen King has a great quote. It's something to the effect of, your second draft is just your first draft minus 10%. Try to get rid of 10% of words, because when people sit down and actually go through and read the email, if there are unnecessary words, that is going to make their user experience worse. And if they're struggling to get through sentences, it's going to be a tiring process and they're going to abandon ship before they get to the end. So it's really critical that you edit. And ideally, here's a pro tip, get a partner. It's really hard to edit your own stuff, although you're probably going to have to at times. But if you can find somebody else to edit for them and they will edit for you, what a valuable resource, right? Every time you have something that is valuable, a valuable piece of content that you want to email people in your organization, you get somebody to edit it for you and you edit theirs, and it's a really magical kind of relationship. Okay, number 4, require a response. If you spend a lot of time crafting an email, it's well within your right to require them to respond to affirm that they've read the email, okay? Don't be shy about it. A lot of times you'll end the email by saying, let me know if you have any questions. What you're doing is you're letting them off the hook. See, the problem is when people get an email, and again, even if they check it, and even if they attend later on to actually read it, there's just so many other things going on, and even though they intend to read the email, they often don't. They often, as Peter Gollwitzer calls it, fail to seize the opportune moment. So by asking them in the very beginning of the email to, hey, this took a lot of time, it's really important information in here, I would love it. Please respond to this email by Friday and let me know that you've read it and you understand it. That's a perfectly legitimate request, okay? And now you have the peace of mind of knowing for sure whether somebody has read your email or not, okay? The important consideration is you can't do this all the time. If you do this all the time, then you become the boy that cried wolf, and it's going to diminish trust. People are not going to take you seriously anymore. You want to reserve this for important emails, for truly important emails, okay? And finally, number 5, send the email individually, okay? So here's the thing. When people read emails, they use what are called heuristics, which are mental shortcuts. And here's one of the mental shortcuts they use. As they're looking through the email, the more people that are in the to field, the less important it is for me personally. Now, that's a shortcut people use. It may not be the smartest shortcut, but it is true, right? When we look at the to field, when we see that there's lots of people that this is addressed to, we assume that it may be important, but it's not so important, because if it was, it would be addressed to me personally. So that's why, and this is called the bystander effect, right? We all know what the bystander effect is. Lots of people in a room together. There's a fire. Nobody reports it because they look at everyone else and assume that they're going to take care of it. This happens digitally. So the way to avoid this, or one way to avoid it, is consider sending it to people individually, okay? Instead of putting everybody on the group email, take some time and actually address each person individually. Might take a little bit more time, but it really can improve the effectiveness of the email. You'll find that more people will actually read it. So again, you don't want to do that all the time, but do it when it's appropriate. So those are the 5 tips for how to get people to actually read your email. I hope you found them useful. I actually have a handout, which I will drop in the chat box right now, the link. So you should all see the link. If you go there, you will actually be able to download a quick PDF that outlines these 5 tips as well as a little bit of content there. So feel free to use that. Right now, I want to answer your questions. If you were here for the 12 minutes, sayonara. Good luck sending out those emails. Use the 5 tips. If you have questions, I really want to make this valuable for you. So let me know what your questions are in the chat box. Okay, submit your questions right now, and we'll go through them. All right? So let me see if there are any questions. John has a question, which is, how do you have others review the email without sending it? I'm not sure if that is like a logistical question, John. If I get this wrong, feel free to email me afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's as simple as putting it in a Word document and sending it to your colleagues, or putting it in a email and just sending it to one person first, the person who's your editing partner, to edit, and then sending out the true email later on. I'm pretty sure I misunderstood your question. So email me offline if that didn't really answer your question. Okay, so Charles has a question, which is, what about voting buttons? Again, maybe I'm off today, but I'm not quite understanding that question either. Charles, if you can clarify, put it in the question box, and I'll get back to you. I use bolding rather than bullets for things like due dates. Is that okay, or am I unintentionally insulting people? Great question, Angela. You are never unintentionally insulting people. You want to treat people like they're 3-year-olds, not 3-year-old, 10-year-olds, right? Because not only is it effective, but people like it. I mean, they really do. When you use bold, when you use bullet points, when you highlight things in really big letters, you're really making it easier for them. There's a great book, and I forget the title of it, but it's by a web design guy. I think it's Krugman, or I can't remember the name, but his thesis is, don't make me think, right? As we're going through the web, every time I have to think is a bad user experience. Make buttons really big with loud call to actions on them that actually describe what the call to action is. Make the most important thing on the website the biggest. Don't make me think. The more I have to think, the less likely I am going to read things. So it may seem like you are kind of treating people like they're stupid, but treat people like they're stupid, because that's actually a better user experience. Let's see here. How do you feel about adding images / attachments? Should they be inline or attached separately? Well, that's a good question. That really depends on I guess it really depends on what's clearer, right? A lot of times, if something is an attachment that is not really so necessary to the email, it's a little bit more like an appendix, something that's supplementary. I like to add that to the attachment, right? Because it's something that, if I just read the email itself and I didn't get to the attachment, then I'm still fine. The attachment is just is almost like an optional thing to go deeper, right? It's kind of like an appendix. So that's usually my rule of thumb. If it's something that's critical to the actual message, right? It's fundamental to the message, then you may want to put it in line. But it's these kinds of, and it's not a rule of thumb and I can't give you a prescription, but it's these kinds of questions that you want to ask. You want to ask yourself from the perspective of the user, from the perspective of the person who's getting the email, what would they want, or what is going to make it clear to them? What are these choices I'm making going to signal to that person, or is it not signaling anything? Do I need to be explicit? These are the kinds of questions that you need to ask yourself, and there's not one size fits all, but if you ask yourself those questions, you often get better answers. Okay. Okay, John says I correctly answered his question. Thanks for the feedback. I wonder if it might be worthwhile to tell people that I'm working to improve my email quality. I think that's a great point, Ed. I always think that when we make improvements in general, people can often miss them unless we're clear to people on the improvements we're making, right? It's kind of, you relate to people differently when you know that they're trying. And you also invite feedback. So when you tell people, hey, I'm trying to make these emails better, so please give me feedback on whether you think they're clearer. One is, you get a lot of points for people. I mean, people really respect that. They really, especially emails where it's something that's so time consuming for people. When, as a teammate, as a manager, as a leader, you let them know that you're trying to improve, immediately they feel like, wow, this person actually cares about me. What a thought in an organization. But two, you also give them permission to give you feedback, because there's no better way to improve the quality. I've said this before time and time again, and I will say it again. There's no better way to improve the quality of your meetings, your emails, or virtually any behavior in an organization than systematic and recurring feedback. Okay? Nothing works better than trial and error, by putting something out there and getting people to actually comment on whether they liked it, whether it was useful or not. Right? That's one of the reasons why I ask for feedback after these webinars every single session, because I read them because I want to see where can I improve, and hopefully the quality gets better. So I think that was a great point, Ed. So we have a lot of questions here. I'm going to answer a couple more, but I don't have time to answer all of them. I will answer them via email afterwards. How do you feel about the blind CC? Good question, Susan. The blind CC is often impolite and if at best, because a blind CC, those of you who don't know that terminology, is when you put somebody in the BCC field where they receive the email, but it appears to everyone else that they don't receive the email. You have to question why you're doing that. Sometimes there's some legitimate reasons why you want to do that, but oftentimes you're doing it as a way to hide, and that can often be problematic. So I would, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, but really ask yourself the question, why are you putting this in the BCC field? Why are you hiding this from everyone else? If you have a good answer, go for it. If not, then it might be inappropriate. Okay, because a lot of times that stuff backfires. When people find out that stuff later on, they start to question what the motives were. So just be careful with that tool. Okay, this is the last question I will take here. Do you see any problem with putting the action desired and the response time in the subject line? Please respond by the close of business on Tuesday the 26th. This is a great suggestion, Hillary. The subject line is your greatest piece of real estate, okay? This is the thing that people read the most, obviously, first in order to decide whether they even open it. Because a lot of times, just based on the subject line, people won't open it. So if you can put the entire message, or at least most of the message, in the subject line, go for it. In fact, if you can put the entire message in the subject line, you can use what is called an EOM tag, which is after the subject line. If you write EOM, it means that that's the end of the message. That's it, folks. So don't even bother clicking on the email because the entire message is in the subject line. The problem is people get a little bit dogmatic about this. Like people who think they're email ninjas try to put everything in the subject line, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the email body, right? I mean, it's not a sign of intelligence or incompetence to try to get everything in the subject line. So use this kind of sparingly. This is different, like in sales, for example, when you are sending emails to a cold prospect, for example, you need to be really, really careful what you put in the subject line and really strategic, because a lot of times people won't even make it past the subject line. In organizations, there's more trust, right? I mean, if I know you, respect you, if you're on my team, chances are I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to open your email and I'm going to read the first couple lines. That's why I'm not such a stickler when it comes to subject lines as some people are. But you know what, use it wisely. That real estate is really important, so do your best. Okay, folks, so there's a lot of questions here, and I'm really happy about the participation here. I promise I'm going to get back to every single person that emailed me with a response. If you have any questions outside of that, feel free to email me. Again, in the chat box is a link to a handout that I made that just has a kind of a synopsis of what we discussed today. Feel free to use that and feel free to give me feedback on that. But again, thanks for attending, and I will see you next week.